Welcome to the LahSET podcast. I am Lauren Hale, a nurse and the founder of LahSET. LahSET is a company focused on helping people through their difficult healthcare journeys. We carry the burden of navigating the healthcare system so that you can focus on healing. LahSET podcast was started to get people's healthcare stories and experiences out to make an impact for others who might be going through a similar journey. We hear from both patients and healthcare professionals. Hey everybody, welcome to the LahSET podcast. I have a very special guest on here with me. Her name is Kate Downey, and we are going to be talking about period pain. How are you, Kate?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I know the last time we talked, you're in the Los Angeles area, and I was
That's
able to
right.
talk to you, and you were outside, so you were finally able to get outside, and the air is getting more clear. Is it still going good there for you guys?
Yeah, we've gotten rain, which just is so
Nice.
helpful for clearing out the air and uh, making it livable again. I don't have to wear a mask when I go outside because of toxic chemicals in the air.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Well, I'm happy that you and your husband are okay.
Yeah,
And yeah, so we'll just get right into it.
great.
So how was your health growing up? And how old are you now? What do you do now?
Yeah, so I am 36, and I always have to think about it now. It's never an easy answer,
Yep, I
but didn't
feel
have to
you.
do math this time, so that's good. So 36, my health is in general pretty good. I exercise pretty frequently to keep myself sane, and my husband and I, really love cooking, and we cook with a lot of vegetables. So I feel very lucky and privileged to be able to do that, and it's kept us pretty healthy so far.
That's awesome. Yeah, good to hear. So no real healthcare problems up until you started your period. So when did you start your period?
So I started my period. It's funny, I can't remember exactly, and I think it's fuzzy in the way that like a lot of these memories about like periods are because we just don't like talk about it that much, so they kind of just like sit there and decay in our heads.
Yes.
But I think it was when I was 13, almost 14. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, I remember that because my birthday's in September, and I remember like going out to tell my mom, and she was out on the porch, and I grew up in Maine, so it must have been in the summer.
Gotcha. Yes, that makes sense. I know I feel like a lot of women too, they like remember where they were, what was
Mhm.
going on, what happened, but otherwise like yeah, I don't feel like you really marked the age that you were when you started your period. So
Yeah.
when was the first time you experienced period pain?
I think it was just a few months after that. I think I had a couple of like normal periods, and I was like, I got this. This is fine. Like, I can totally handle this. And then I was in class. I was in science class in uh, ninth grade and freshman year of high school. And I started feeling this just horrible, like sinking feeling in my stomach. And I started getting sweaty and feeling like I was going to throw up. And it wasn't, I remember very vividly being like, oh no, something is really wrong in a way that I've never experienced something being wrong like this. Like something is very wrong with my body. Um, and it wasn't like, oh, my stomach hurts or, oh, I'm having cramps. It was this like whole body, like, uh-oh feeling. And
Right.
and I asked to go to the bathroom, and as I was trying to make my way to the bathroom, I realized I couldn't stand up all the way. I had to stay hunched over. I was like holding myself up against the lockers in the empty hallway. And so halfway to the bathroom, I was like, I'm actually going to go to the nurse's office because I think I might, like, did my appendix burst? Did, like, something is really, really wrong. And I got to the nurse's office, and I was like, something hurts and I have to throw up and I have to poop. She was like, oh, do you have your period? And I was like, yeah. She was like, oh, okay, so you have cramps. So here, have a hot water bottle. And you can stay here for a little while, but like, you can't stay here all day. I was like,
Yeah.
what? Why aren't you calling an ambulance? Like, this hurts so much. Like, this is if this was anything else, you'd be taking me to the hospital. Like, how can you just be like telling me to lie down? And I was getting up, like there was a bathroom in the nurse's office, and I was getting up and throwing up every like 10 minutes, and I was hyperventilating. And I just was like, why is no one freaking out? This is crazy. And finally she was like, okay, well, your cramps seem bad, so I'm gonna call your parents. They called my parents. My mom came to get me. My hands were like claws. Like when you hyperventilate so much, I forget
Right.
there's a name for it, but like my hands were claws.
Yeah.
I was kind of like passing out and then like throwing up and then passing out. And my mom was like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" I was like, "I don't know." She took me home. She was like, "Okay, well, if this keeps going, we're going to take you to the hospital." And I finally passed out and like stayed passed out for a couple hours. And when I woke up, my cramps were gone, and we were all just kind of like, okay, that was weird. Um, let's go to the doctor at some. And so after that, I had my first gynecologist appointment.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is a crazy story. And I feel like that's not normal at all. Like, did the nurse at your school act in any way concerned once like the other things started happening?
Yeah, I don't have like a super clear memory of that part. Like once the
Yeah.
throwing up started, I was just kind of like, and I feel like I maybe she did, and like didn't remember it, but
Right.
all I remember is her being very like blasé about what was happening to me, and just sort of asking like, "Do you always get cramps this bad?" And me being like, "No, I don't. I just got my period a couple months ago." Like, um, and I think that's why she called my parents, but it
Yeah.
did shock me that that it wasn't that no one was more concerned. And even my parents
Right.
were, my mom never got like cramps that bad. And so for her, she was concerned, but
Yeah.
it was definitely, I also grew up in rural Maine. So it's like going to the hospital, it's like
Mhm.
an hour drive. And I think there's a lot of like weighing of like, okay, how bad is this? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Are you gonna die? If you're gonna die, we will make the drive in.
yeah, exactly. And also, I grew up without very much money. Like, my family was very much working class, and so like the idea we had insurance, but the idea of
Yeah.
like going to the hospital, that was going to be expensive, and so
Mhm.
it was like there was a lot of sympathy and like, oh, I'll make you tea, or I'll like, do you need ibuprofen, or do you need, do you need something? I'll get it for you, but it was not like, oh, let's rush to the doctor right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you say pass out, you would literally like go unconscious and then just like wake up and be like, "Oh, like I passed out again," or what happened?
Yeah,
Oh my
I would
gosh.
pass out from the pain basically. It was not as it wasn't like fainting. Like I wouldn't pass out if I was like sitting up or standing up, but if I would throw up, and then I would like go lie down and lose consciousness basically. So I think it's partly like
Wow.
a protective mechanism. I think it's not like, but it is also it would happen after um, I'd been in pain for hours and hours, and I think part of it is a protective mechanism that your body has, just like shut up.
Right. Yeah. That's really crazy. I mean, like, I'm a nurse. I've never personally heard about that until I spoke to you. So that just sounds terrible.
Well, you know what's
So,
crazy is like
yeah.
I've spoken to a lot of other people who have this kind of pain with their period, and this is a
Yeah.
pretty regular occurrence. I feel lucky that truly, like, as bad as it is, I feel lucky that it was never every month for me. It was always
Yeah.
like once every 3 or 4 months. So I don't know why. I still have no idea why that is true, but
Wow.
I know other people where every month that was their experience, and for days and days, or people who got this kind of pain with ovulation, like, and other, or people who are in pain all the time, not even during their cycle only. So, as crazy as it sounds, I count myself lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just can't function like that at all, especially if it's occurring every month for however long. I mean, that's
Right. And
crazy.
even on the months it doesn't occur, I never know when it is going to happen. And so
Hmm.
when I start getting any kind of cramps near my period, and it would also, this pain would sometimes happen like this severity of cramps would happen before I even actually was bleeding. So sometimes this would be like the day before I started bleeding, or it would happen like for hours before I started bleeding. So you don't even really get warning. And it's why I started tracking
Yeah.
my period very closely, was so that I could kind of like be on guard. Because
Yeah.
the second I would start to feel anything happening like in my uterus, I would be like panicking that I was going, and I'd have to be like, okay, am I in a place where I can go use the bathroom for hours at a time if I need to? Am I in a
Hmm.
place where there's somewhere safe for me to pass out? Like, which, now that I'm in my 30s, it's like, okay, you stay home. But when you're in your teens and 20s, when you're in college, like that's a very different freshman year of college. I was in a dorm where I shared a big bathroom with 25 people. Like very sometimes you don't have a safe place to throw up for hours or lie down, like
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
My gosh. So you decided to go to an OBGYN appointment.
Yeah.
Did the OBGYN have any answers for you at that point?
No. So this is something I'm still mad about. The OBGYN that my mom took me to happened again, small town, rural Maine. This person was the midwife who had like helped my mom give birth to me. So
That's funny. Yeah.
like
Okay.
it very tight knit community. And she was a medical doctor, but also like a naturopath and did some more like holistic stuff as well. Um, and so my mom really trusted her and had like had a lot of success with her before. And 14-year-old me is like sitting there had never gotten a pelvic exam, had never like experienced. So this is all brand new. And my mom and I both asked her, like, okay, well, I have this kind of pain. I have this really bad pain. What is that? And she was like, okay, well, I didn't see anything wrong during the exam. I'm not feeling anything wrong, like with a like palpitating your belly. And so, some women just get really bad cramps and, they'll probably go away when you have your first baby. Like most women say that their cramps get better after they have a baby. And I was like, cool, I'm 14. Like, are you telling me that I'm just going to be in horrific, like debilitating, life ruining pain like potentially every month until I have a baby, which could be 10 to 20 years from now? Like, what are you talking about? And we talked about,
Gosh.
I think at that point she like suggested birth control, but my mom also is a hippie and like had she has a lot of legitimate knowledge from like growing up in the 70s during the time when like birth control was causing strokes and blood clots,
Wow.
and women
Yeah.
weren't informed before they took this medication, and so she was like, I don't know about birth control. I did end up going on birth control when I was 15,
Okay.
partly for cramps and partly because I wanted to be on birth control, but it didn't help.
Yeah.
It was not effective. It maybe like took the frequency down a little bit, but it
Yeah.
wasn't a fix. Yeah.
Okay. And I know too, like some OBGYNs prescribe birth control and they'll have you skip the placebo week just so
Yeah.
you don't ever have a period. Did anyone ever suggest that to you?
Nope. No,
Okay.
that was never presented to me as an option. And I don't know that I would have taken
Yeah.
it, like, because my mom is very aware that like messing with your hormones and your normal bodily functions is like, we don't like, medicine is not necessarily on our side or
Yeah.
knows all of the things all of the results that can happen from that. So she probably would, even if that had been presented as an option, like I
Yeah.
don't know that I would have felt good about doing that. But like looking back now, I do really wish that that had been an option,
Yeah.
or that had like been presented to me. But Yeah, what can you do?
Yeah. Yep. I understand. And you never know like what messing with your natural rhythm is going to do. Like you want to do the best thing, but you don't know what the right thing is to do sometimes, even with
Right.
the options presented. So it
Especially at
makes
that
sense.
age, like at that age of 14, 15, like you're still doing so much growing, so much developing. And we don't have
Yes.
a lot, there's not a lot of research done on like that, what taking those natural hormone processes like offline and replacing them with synthetic, like flatline hormones. Not
Right.
a lot of studies and information about what that actually like does in terms of like development and growth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
Would you consider that you're like at that time, was your period like heavy or was it light?
No, and that was always, it's never been heavy. It's always been very light. And that was something
Yeah.
that contributed to me always hitting like this dead end with doctors where I'd say I get this
Mhm.
horrible, debilitating, like awful period pain that has me like throwing up on the floor, diarrhea, like hours and hours, passing out, um, help. And they would be like, oh, okay, do you have heavy periods? And I'd be like, no, they're very
Mhm.
light because I would have pretty short cycles but very regular. So my cycles
Mhm.
were like 24 days, and like 2 day periods and very light. And so not
Wow.
like when I say, and it's also like, what do we mean by very light? Like, do we have a consensus of like what heavy and what light means? Like I was not bleeding through anything, but so I don't, it wasn't like only spotting, but like sometimes if I was caught out, like if I was like out at a concert and I got my period, I could just like I could wad up some toilet paper and put it in my underwear and be like fine for a couple hours. Like that's what
Oh,
I knew
okay.
by light.
Right. Yes. Yeah, well, no one explains that, and, like, normal to you is what's normal and what's happening,
Exactly.
so, yeah,
So
you
I would
don't really
always,
know.
when I would tell doctors, no, I have a regular cycle and light flow, then they'd be like, oh, okay, well, then nothing's wrong. And it's like, that can't be true.
Yeah, something is still wrong, and yeah, you're right, I mean, a common question that goes along with, "Oh, you're having pain? Are you having clots? Are you going through multiple pads and tampons a day?" Things like that. So when they're not together, I could see why doctors are like, "Okay, well, I give up, whatever."
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I still don't know. Like I have some answers now, but I still don't know why my periods are so late.
Right. And I mean, we're all different. And I know that
Hmm.
you've mentioned that too. It's just like you can't get the same treatment for everybody. Like, we're all different. We all need to be looked at differently, even though we're all
Right.
women with periods. And I think
Hmm.
that that's what's frustrating about some of this. And I remember too, like, so when I was sick, I ended up going to more of like a functional medicine nutritionist, and she asked me like, "Oh, do you have pain with your periods?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." And she was like, "You shouldn't have pain with your periods." And I was like,
Mm.
"What?" Like
Yeah.
that is the first time I've ever heard that in my life. And
Yeah.
she basically said, which again, I don't ever know what's true because people say so many different things all the time. But she was like, "The only way you should know you're having your period is that you're bleeding. That is it.
Wow.
You shouldn't feel anything else." And I'm like, "Well, then I must be really messed up." Because I have a lot more problems than just bleeding.
Right. But it's not that you're messed up. It's that we live in a messed up world that posts us and doesn't take care of
Yes.
us. And so like there's nothing wrong with you. That's something that I've also learned is that because I felt for 20 years of my life, I was like, and that was really what was more traumatic than the actual pain because it's like okay, we're resilient, we can, pain sucks and I hate it, but like we can deal with pain, like we can handle
Yes.
some hours of debilitating pain. It sucks, we shouldn't have to, but we can. But the thing that was the most, that like stuck with me the most and hurt the most, like all the time, was the reactions to the pain. And like, I was a healthy kid, and then something happens to me that no one could explain to me. The people that I
Mhm.
go to for help, my parents, doctors, like school nurse, everyone I went to, not only didn't know what was happening and would always just be like, huh, weird. Like, this, but they couldn't help me. And they also,
Right.
it was this weird, like, cognitive dissonance thing where I was like, something clearly wrong is happening. but you're either acting like it's not that big a deal and nothing's actually wrong, or
Mm-hmm.
you're just sort of shrugging and there's no curiosity. There's no like, well, let's try this test. Let's try that test. Let's try, like, what if we put you on this supplement and see if that helps you? Like, there
Yeah.
was no like real problem solving applied to it. And so I walked away. Like, I'm sure this is not what anyone intended, but I walked away being like, okay, well, this is something that is just like, that is only wrong with me. They've never seen this before. They've never heard of this before. So
Mm-hmm.
it's my problem. It's like something that I just have to deal with because they can't help me.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
being like alone and like abandoned with all the people who are from all the people that are supposed to help you, it's like that sticks with you. That like makes you feel like there's something wrong with you and it's like your fault somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I completely get it. And I feel like a lot of people feel like that with a lot of different things. And it makes you feel, first of all, confused. It makes you feel like a freak. Like you said,
Yeah.
like, I'm the only person that's ever come in like this. I'm a weirdo. And
Yeah.
then you also feel like you're somewhat responsible for your care, which
Yeah.
is really alarming because you're like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not any of these things. And now I'm
Yeah.
responsible for, when this pops up, whenever it's going to pop up. And so I'm sure that was super scary.
Mhm. Yeah, and it was also, it adds to the taboo about talking about your period, really adds to it. I had really close girlfriends like all through high school, and when I would like be able to talk about it, and some of them like saw what it would do to me. Some of them were, like at track practice or like play rehearsal, like it would happen to me and I would have to be like, okay, I have to go. Like, or can you call my mom? Like it would be an
Aw.
emergency. And I would be
Yeah.
like, do you get cramps? Like, and they'd be like, yeah, I get cramps. Like it sucks. And I just was like, but it's not the same. But
Yeah.
you don't like it's not an emergency for you. Like it sucks, but it's like, and
Hmm.
I don't have other words to tell you about this. Like, and you don't, I, all
Hmm.
the only words we have are cramps. The only word we have for what is happening, whether it's just like a little achy or if it's like a full blown medical emergency, it's cramps. Like, and
Yeah.
that makes it
Exactly.
really, keeps you alone in it because it makes it so hard to communicate what is actually happening to you.
Yeah. And I think people too are just so judgmental because they're thinking she's having the same cramps I'm having or whatever it
Exactly.
might be. And when I worked in the ER, so I worked in the ER for like 10 years. I
Wow.
remember this girl, like a young girl coming in, and she said she was having cramps. She was on her period. I think she was trying to present it in a way where it's like, I'm sure it's not my cramps. It's got to be something else because I'm in so much pain. And I just remember the ER doctors rolling their eyes like, "Ugh, she's just having period cramps." And like, it's just sad because, yeah,
Yeah.
like their pain might not be the same as her pain. She might be having something different going on, but it really was dismissed. And I mean, they did not
Yeah.
treat her well at all. And
No.
sad.
And I've had many experiences in the ER as well. That I have a whole episode of the podcast about what happens when you go to the ER because this is such an undertreated,
Mhm.
your regular doctor, your OBGYN even maybe isn't equipped to deal with this kind of period pain, doesn't have anything helpful for you. And so if you are in severe period pain, like I had multiple times as an adult where I would be throwing up for hours and hours and hours, like 7 hours of just throwing up every 10 minutes.
Jeez.
And like in the past, I had always, been throwing up for like maybe 3 hours, 4 hours, and then I would pass out from the pain. And that would end that session of what I call death cramps. And
Hmm.
that would be what I would rely on, because once you start throwing up, you can't keep meds down. And so it would be like, once I started throwing up, it was like, well, this is just gonna play out now. But then sometimes, for whatever reason, a few times I kept throwing up. I couldn't stop. And it was literally like, okay, if I can't stop throwing up, I'm gonna die. Like, Like I can't
Yeah.
keep water down. Like I can't, what am I gonna do if I can't I can't make myself stop throwing up. I can't take any meds. I can't
Hmm.
keep water down. Like I need help. And you go to the emergency room because that's where you go when you need help with something that's happening to your body. And you go and they are just like, weird, we don't know what's happening to you.
That's so
And
helpful.
I had one good experience in an urgent care where randomly it was when
Yeah.
I was living in Manhattan, and I like randomly went to the urgent care that was closest to me, and I like told them that this was dysmenorrhea, this was severe period pain, this had happened to me. I had been throwing up for 7 hours and I couldn't stop. And they were like, okay. And they put me in a room and they gave me an IV with muscle relaxant and saline. And within truly 5 minutes, it was like I could feel it going through my veins and I was okay. It was like, it was so crazy how quickly it worked, how effective
Yeah.
it was. It was like rehydrating and it stopped my cramps because it's a muscle relaxant. And I was
Hmm.
able to like walk out of there and like be okay. Obviously, like exhausted and tired and like
Yeah.
sore, but okay. And so the next time, like a couple of years later, I had to go to the ER again. And I was like, I got this. Like, I know that it's dysmenorrhea. Last time they gave me an IV muscle relaxant with saline, it cleared it up within minutes. Like, just do that. And they and I had to like wait an hour and a half to get seen. And then when I got seen, it was like the middle of summer, and the doctor was like, "Oh, did you eat something that had been sitting out on the counter?" And I was like, still throwing up into like constantly throwing up, and it was bile. Like there was nothing. I had been throwing up for 7 to 8 hours. Like there was nothing in
Yeah.
my system, and I was like, this is cramps. Like this is dysmenorrhea. Has happened to me before. I've had to come to the hospital for cramps before. Like just give me muscle relaxant. And they were like, okay, we're going to give you an IV not anti-nausea and see if that clears it up. So they gave me an IV anti-nausea, and I had to sit there for another hour and a half before they came back. And they were like, still throwing up, still wheeling my IV bag to the bathroom to have diarrhea. There was nothing in my system. And they were like, oh, okay, I guess it wasn't nausea. And then he gave me IV morphine, which then made me pass out. And I was passed out for like an hour and a half. And I was like, I've been taking up a bed in this ER for so long. And you could have just done what I told you was like, done what I
Right.
told you worked before. And I would have been out of your hair. Like neither of us would have had to go through this. And then from that experience, once I left, and after a little bit, I got a bill for $18,000 because that it
Oh
had
my
insurance,
gosh.
but I didn't check which ERs. It was the closest ER to me, and I didn't check
Yeah.
that it was in my insurance, and it was an $18,000 bill to like, frankly, not get help.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the fact that he chose morphine over a muscle relaxant and how you said, "Hey, I get this sometimes. This worked last time." Like that's
Mhm.
super crazy. And that bill is crazy. Did they do any imaging that you remember at that ER?
I think they may have done like an ultrasound, like the kind that they could wheel over and like
Oh, okay.
do. They didn't
Gotcha.
send me for like an MRI or anything like that I remember. And again, it's hazy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So did you end
Yeah.
up having to pay that $18,000 bill?
So I spent a lot of time on the phone with the hospital administrators, talking my way through the levels of managers and explaining my situation, and that I hadn't gotten appropriate care, really,
Mhm.
and also I was not making very much money at the time. I was like, there's no way I can pay this. I need to speak to someone who can talk to me about this and adjust this. Fine. And so it took months of like calling at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. And I eventually finally got to talk to someone who actually could change the amount of my bill. And uh, they brought it down to $10,000. And I
Wow.
ended up, yeah, and I ended up paying that with a payment plan over the course of years.
Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, which still is a high bill, but I think
Yeah.
it's good for people to know that you can do things like this, like call and complain or call and just say, like, I had no idea that I couldn't just go to any ER that was closest. Like when you're in an emergency situation, you're going to go
Right.
to the closest ER. Like it should be
Exactly.
covered no matter where I go. So
Mhm.
that's crazy as well.
Yeah. It's all pretty
So
bad.
yeah. So then what did you do next? How did you eventually like get answers and find healing in what you were going through?
Yeah. So, my whole adulthood from, 15 to um, 35, every new doctor I went to, and I was, living in New York and then LA, I was changing insurances all the time, depending on the job I had, or like, it was, so I was seeing kind of new doctors all the time. Like I wasn't with one doctor for any time longer than a couple of years. Um,
Yeah.
and because I'm relatively healthy outside of this issue, like I didn't have a lot of relationship or a consistency with any doctors, which I think kind of contributed to the fact that I didn't make any progress in this. There were definitely like good doctors and bad doctors when it would come to this. Like if I would see a new doctor and I would tell them about this, like most doctors would go, okay, let's get you for an ultrasound. So every couple of years, I would have an ultrasound. It would come back normal, and that would be it. Like there would not really be another step to that. They would just say, okay, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, you're fine. So it's
Right.
just really bad cramps. And, so, like at certain, I had like a high dose ibuprofen prescribed to me at one point, but it was like, why bother? Like, I'll just take more ibuprofen.
Right.
The one thing that was really helpful was I was seeing a psychologist who recommended at a certain point in my early 30s. It was like I wanted to get. Actually, there was a whole saga with an IUD. I got a hormonal IUD, Skyla, um, at the beginning of Trump's first presidency, when there was a worry that we were going to lose access to contraception. Which, haha, we're back. But I got this hormonal IUD and I had it in for 2 years. And during that 2 years, I started having panic attacks all the time,
Oh my
especially right
gosh.
before my period. And I couldn't figure out why. I was, of course, like I had changed jobs. I was in a pretty stressful, I was like managing, helping, or I was the co owner of a theater, and it was stressful. And so I thought, oh, I'm just not handling this very well. Started to see a therapist. Um, I was still working with this therapist for like a year. She happened to ask the question about hormones and like, are you on hormonal birth control? And I was like, yeah, I have a Skyla. And she was like, okay, you should look up the side effects, because hormonal birth control can contribute to feelings of anxiety, or panic attacks. And I looked it up, and it turns out, yeah, 30% of people who got this IUD reported much higher levels of anxiety and panic attacks. And so it's like,
Wow.
oh, so that's been it this whole time. So I got that removed, and in the process of um, trying to recover from that, because it takes your body a long time to kind of rebalance its hormones,
Mhm.
I wanted to go on an antidepressant to help with the anxiety. And to do that, I saw a psychiatrist, who wasn't really like my therapist. I saw him, told him my symptoms, why I wanted to be on antidepressants. He said, okay. And then I had to see him like every month just to kind of like check in. And one month, I had an appointment with him a few days after this like really bad emergency room story that I just told you about. And he was like,
Yeah.
how are you? And I was like, bad. I had to go to the emergency room for my cramps and it sucked. And like I told him the story, and he was like, oh, do you want some Valium? And I was like, what? What are you talking about? He was like, oh, some of my female patients when they get really bad cramps, they say Valium really helps, so I'm happy to give you a prescription. And I was like, okay, no one has ever mentioned this to me before. And so
No.
he gave me a Valium prescription just for like 3 pills a month. And it now is, since then, it has been my let's not go to the emergency room today pill, where if
Yeah.
it feels like I don't take it every month, I don't take it every time I have cramps, but if it
Mhm.
feels like it's going to get bad, they're going to become like throwing up, like passing out cramps, I
Yeah.
try to take a Valium before the throwing up starts. And if I can time it right, then then I don't have to go to the ER. And so like,
That's amazing. Can you imagine if you would have had that like a long time ago when you were 14 or
right,
something?
right. Why at no point did any doctor go, I was never prescribed a muscle relaxant, which I look back on now and I say, like, what? How was I never prescribed a muscle
Yeah.
relaxant? Like, it doesn't work for everybody, but like, we could try. I was never
Right.
prescribed Valium. There are so many things that we could have tried, that my doctors could have tried if there was the slightest bit of curiosity, the slightest bit of like creative problem solving applied to this.
Right.
But
Let's not
it had to
stop
be
until
from a
we get an answer.
psychiatrist. Right. It had to be, or at least let's try to find something that helps you. Even if we can't find an answer, or like,
Mhm.
it's not the right time for you to like have exploratory surgery or whatever. Like, let's find something that gets you through the day. Like when you're having this pain, since it's not all the time, since it's intermittent, like and it wasn't, it just was not seen as important or a priority or real, probably for some of these doctors. So
Right.
yeah, so I cobbled together a bunch of things that helped me. And I think also a big part of it was becoming used to it. Like, I think a big part of
Yeah.
how painful it was the panic that I would feel every time I would start to get cramps of like, oh God, is it happening? When you tense up and like those
Yeah.
things don't help, though they are understandable. And
Mhm.
yeah, over 20 years, 22 years, have I kind of just have my like toolbox of things that I use, and methods and you know levers I can pull to get through it.
Yeah. So to this day, what is in your toolbox?
Mm.
What do you typically do?
Yes, so there are a lot of number one, I learned the correct way to take ibuprofen, which
Okay.
is you start taking it 48 hours before you're supposed to get your period, which is a pain in the ass because you have to track your period. It only really works if you have if you have fairly regular periods.
Right.
Um, but the way you are supposed to, I'll spare you like the whole prostaglandins explanation that I never like know because of this podcast, but like, um, ibuprofen blocks prostaglandins, and prostaglandins are what tell your uterus to cramp. They're also an inflammatory mediator. So uh, ibuprofen kind of like gets in the receptors and blocks it. So yes, you can take ibuprofen after you have started having cramps, but like the prostaglandins have already bound with the receptors at that point, and so it's much
Mhm.
more effective to start taking ibuprofen like 24 to 48 hours before you expect to get your period, so that it's already in your bloodstream, it's already blocking those receptors, um, and that is like very, very effective.
Okay.
um, that helps so much to take the ibuprofen ahead of time. It requires planning, it requires consistency. Like, I don't think I could have done this in my 20s because I was just like not organized enough. But now it is like the number one thing that I have to do. Um, Along with that, red raspberry leaf tea. There are some studies that have shown it is as effective as ibuprofen. Uh, it like, I don't know what this means, but it tones the uterus. Um, and apparently, like I drink red raspberry leaf tea. This like when I start taking ibuprofen, I also start drinking red raspberry leaf tea, and I drink
Okay.
loose leaf tea in the morning, so it's easy. I just like grab a handful of red raspberry leaf and put it in my tea in the morning, in like the steeper in the morning. So
Gotcha.
um, that And that has helped a ton. I have really gotten into like medicinal teas lately because they
Yeah.
are, it's plant medicine and it's very accessible. You can order it in bulk online. And I do find that it helps as long as you are like good about taking it ahead of time. It doesn't
Yeah.
help with like acute pain in the moment so much, but like
Okay.
if you get into a routine and make it part of like your week before your period routine, that is really, I found that really effective. The Valium is huge. That the Valium is really the only thing I have found that once I am already having cramps, Valium is the
Mhm.
only thing that's gonna like take that down, you know,
Okay.
for me. And
Yeah.
there's a lot I haven't tried. I haven't tried muscle relaxants. They just like haven't been offered, haven't been,
Okay.
and there's a lot of, I haven't tried a TENS machine. I don't find that a heating pad helps me very much. Like I use that mainly
Okay.
for my lower back. But I think I have some inflammation issues and heat can make that worse.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah,
Right. Where
yeah.
did you learn about the tea?
It's a good question. I think on Reddit, honestly.
Oh,
There are a
okay.
lot of
Yeah.
really great communities on Reddit for period cramps, for if you have a diagnosis of something that causes period pain, like endometriosis or PCOS or fibroids. There are so many great communities out there with like crowdsourced information where people are saying, like, here's what helped me, here's what I did when I had bad cramps, here's, and like,
Yes.
again, that's anecdotal. So it's like your mileage may vary, like, but you can find information. I found information there that I had never heard from a doctor. Like
Right.
just things I could try that would help, things that might move the needle a little or improve my quality of life, which were not things that the doctors ever really seemed interested in helping me with.
Yeah. And it's crazy too that just no one follows up with you either. It's like,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't have an answer. Here's this and see you later. And I mean, it seems like that they would want to find some kind of answer. And I know that that's why you started your podcast,
Hmm.
Cramped,
Yeah.
which as of right now, while we're recording, you have 2 episodes out. I
Yes.
listened to the one last week. I'm going to listen to the one today while I do the Peloton and I'm super excited
Nice.
cuz this is the one about the ER, right? That you were just
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
perfect timing. Yeah.
Yes, so
Um,
I'm gonna listen to that. But yeah, so you started this in hopes of like getting answers for yourself,
yes.
but also just advocating for women. So through this process, did you end up finding any type of answer, like the actual root cause rather than just like some of the band-aids to fix it?
Yes, I did. So yeah, when I started working on this podcast last year, my goal was to find the answers to all these questions that I had had about my period pain and share them with people. And so basically because I like committed to this project, I ended up seeing an endometriosis specialist, out of pocket, like not covered by my insurance, which I honestly don't think I would have like nutted up to do without like having promised to find answers because I pay $400 a month for my insurance. Like it's really
Wow.
hard to pay another, it was over $800 just for the initial appointment to see this person, this specialist. And she does not take insurance as most endometriosis specialists don't. Like some do, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was really hard to like spend that money and go see this doctor. But the experience was pretty incredible. She asked for all of my medical records ahead of time, all of my previous imaging, which like tracking that down was crazy.
Oh,
Having
I
seen like so
bet.
many different doctors. But she had reviewed everything before I got there. The appointment was over an hour long. And
Wow.
it was her asking me questions, her answering my questions. It was a short physical exam and then her being like, okay, here's what I think is going on, and here's why I think this is happening. What are your questions? Okay. Oh, I can answer this. Oh, here, I can. And she would like draw me diagrams, showed me little videos. Like, I left that hour long appointment with more answers than I had had my whole like adult life going to doctors. And it was so essentially my diagnosis, and it's not an official, complete 100% diagnosis. And it'll be clear why, but is endometriosis and possible adenomyosis.
Okay.
Now, endometriosis and adenomyosis can only be diagnosed 100% sure with laparoscopic surgery, where they excise tissue from the lesions of endometriosis and send them to a lab to be tested. And if they come back like positive for these cells that are similar to the cells in the lining of your uterus, then yes, you have endometriosis. But based on the specialist's opinion, she says she's about 95% sure that I have endometriosis, that all of my symptoms
Wow.
align with that, that in fact my cervix is pulled over to the right because I likely have a lot of a lot more endo lesions and possible scarring and adhesions on my right side, which kind of twists and pulls the organs over to one side, which blew my mind.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And a lot of things were connected to this diagnosis that I had never considered connected to my period pain. Like I have been mildly constipated my whole life and never thought that that had anything to do with my period pain. But it turns out it does, because endometriosis can be on your bowels or your colon and pull everything out of whack. And I ended up having a pretty severe case of SIBO that had to be treated before we could do anything else. So my digestion and like gut motility is way better and different than it's ever been in my life. Like I pay so
Yeah.
much more attention to it. And
Right.
and realizing that like that is it isn't just like something's happening in my uterus, it's the whole system. It's like it affects everything.
Yeah.
Um
It's all connected. Your hormones, your
yeah,
GI tract, the serotonin that gets released,
yeah,
and all kinds of things. So, did
yeah.
she say that SIBO can specifically be related to endometriosis?
So it is something that is very often, what is it? Not morbidity, a
Oh,
co-occurring situation.
yeah. Okay.
Because endo can affect digestion and affect the intestines or the colon, like, and pull it out of whack. So that it slows things passing through the intestines. And when it slows that down, bacteria have a chance to come up from the large intestine into the small intestine where they're not supposed to be, but they come
Yeah.
up there because there's stuff sitting there.
That makes
So
sense.
so many people, I think she said most people with endo also have some kind of gut issues, whether that's SIBO, whether that's acid reflux. There are just so many things, because endo can be anywhere. It has
Yeah.
so many different kinds of effects that it could be. And also inflammation is a huge part of it. So like, because if you think about it, you have these endo is having these bits of these pieces of basically your endometrial lining, which thicken and bleed. They respond to hormones the same way the lining of your uterus does. And so you're basically internally bleeding every month from these little spots, wherever they are. And
Wow.
that your body doesn't like when you're internally bleeding. It releases a bunch of, white blood cells and other inflammatory things, because it's like something's wrong, something's happening that shouldn't be happening. And
Right.
what do we do when that happens? We send these, white blood cells and these inflammatory mediators. And so then you have widespread inflammation. And inflammation, I'm sure, as we know from like hearing about inflammation like over the last
Yeah.
5 years, that causes so many issues, more allergies, fatigue,
Hmm.
depression, a reduction in serotonin, more cortisol, like I'm not a doctor. I don't know any how any of this really works, but like
Yeah.
that inflammation piece is tricky and seems to affect basically every system in the body. And so one thing that I have finally like accepted that I have to do is deal with my nervous system. That my nervous system has been on high alert. I lived in New York for like 8 years. Like it
That'll
like
do it.
I was tuned very high, and I still am I still am a high energy person, but
Yeah.
I hate meditating, but I do it. I try to do it every day, even if it's just for like 5 minutes or 8 minutes, like because it takes the temperature down on my nervous system, which helps my
Hmm.
body do the rest and digest stuff. That if it doesn't do that, there are dire consequences. And so, like, for example, this past month when we had the LA fires, and
Hmm.
I woke up one morning and there was, it was raining ash from the sky and it was a completely
Oh
black
my gosh.
sky at 8 in the morning. And we had to evacuate. We didn't know if our house, we were not in an evacuation zone, but we couldn't breathe the air. So we left and didn't know if the fire was going to come to our house. We didn't know when we would be able to return. It was incredibly stressful. And I had an
Yeah.
extremely painful period about 3 weeks later because that does affect it. Like the the situations you're in, the way your body responds to stress, um,
Hmm.
affects your period pain, affects your health. Like, and I resisted that for so long. And I think just like accepting it and like you can't always do something about it. Like you can't. It's not like under your control all the time, but at least understanding like okay, this is happening because of this thing I went through, this experience I had. It's not because I'm failing at taking care of myself. It's not because my endo is getting
Yes.
worse. It's because things happen that have like effects.
Right. And it's like a domino effect. And like you said, it's things that you can't control sometimes. Like
Yeah.
you couldn't have controlled the fire coming
Right.
and all of these different things. So that makes a lot of sense. So I
It's
wanted to
really
go
fun.
back to the SIBO. So I wanted to
Yeah.
say too, SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So
Yes.
I had heard that maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and I'm like, what the heck is SIBO? I've never heard of this before. I'm a nurse. My PCP is the one that told me about it.
Mm.
Um, but you basically take a breath test. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
you breathe into a series of plastic bags through like a valve over the course of 90 minutes. And you drink like a sugar drink and then you breathe every 15 minutes into a plastic bag. And then you like
Okay.
put the plastic bags in a mailing box and you like mail these bags of air to a lab. It
Oh,
feels like a silly process. I'm sure there's
that
versions
is
of the test that
crazy.
you can do like in office as
Yes.
well, but the version I did was like they ship it to you, you breathe into tubes, you ship it back, they tell you your
Oh,
results.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So then if it comes back positive, you take one or two antibiotics. And
Yeah.
I want you to explain real quick. I know you took antibiotics. What happened to you after you took these antibiotics?
Yeah. So I took 2 antibiotics, and it's a 2 week course. So it's pretty intense. And
Okay.
I knew that this was going to be an intense um, sort of situation. And often when I take antibiotics, you get a yeast infection or things happen because your system is out of whack because your biome is totally like devastated.
Yeah.
So I like read all of the possible side effects of these particular antibiotics, started taking them about 3 or 4 days into taking these antibiotics. I got hit with the craziest symptoms where I was completely exhausted, like just totally like had to lie down every like half hour. Um, I was anxious. My anxiety was crazy high and I couldn't figure out why. Um, and I was like looking back through the side effects of these antibiotics, being like, what is going on? And I went back to like Reddit and I think I was like Googling around and I saw some Reddit
Yeah.
posts about die-off effect, where when you have a large overgrowth of a particular kind of bacteria, or it can happen with like Candida yeast as well. And if you take something that is like strong and wipes it out quickly, all of these bacteria, all of these organisms dying at once, they release toxins. And
Wow.
because so many, you know, each, if there was a small population of this organism and it released these toxins, your body could handle it fine and you wouldn't really feel the effects. But when the
Yeah.
population is very large, when it has overgrown so much, you feel the effects of this toxin and it basically
That's
poisons you.
crazy.
And
Yeah.
so for like 4 days, I was a mess. And then I got through it, and like the rest of the time, I was fine. But like that really showed me how bad the overgrowth had gotten, and
Hmm.
also how it had probably been there for years, if not like my whole life, um,
Yeah.
which is crazy. Yeah.
That is really crazy. I mean, that story is crazy. Did anyone alert you to that this might happen? The person that prescribed the antibiotics? Okay.
No, and she was great. She was like a functional nutritionist, and I really enjoyed
Okay.
working with her. I mean, she's the one that like told me the doctor, the endometriosis specialist, did say that she thought I probably had SIBO, and so like then I talked to the nutritionist about it, and we like sort of came up with a plan together. She helped me order the test, you know, all of that. She like was with me through all of that. But she didn't talk about die off effect. Like, no, I was not.
Okay.
I had to figure that out for myself.
Oh my gosh.
I
So are
honestly,
you
and
feeling
it was funny because when I talked to her about it, our next like session, she was like, "Oh, I could have given you something for that." And I was like, "Okay, why
dang
didn't you?"
it?
Like,
Right.
there's apparently
Yes.
like an activated charcoal or something. There's like um, things you can take that sort of like suck up those toxins. And I
Okay.
also feel weird, like I felt weird talking about SIBO. I feel weird talking about candida. I feel weird talking about the toxins of the die-off effect because these are all things that I have seen people on social media kind of get like conspiracy brained about and like be like, oh,
Yeah.
I think I have this. Like, here's how I dealt with this without involving a doctor and like just all this stuff where and it's like, oh, candida causes like everything that's wrong with you. And
Yeah.
so I had kind of been like, oh, I'm not getting involved in this. This sounds kind of bullshitty and like scammy and like wellness
Right.
influencery. But it's like, no, I had SIBO. And I had
Yeah.
SIBO because I had endometriosis um and it was real. Like, I don't know, it just made me feel it makes me feel weird talking about it because I had sort of filed it away in the like grift section of my brain, you know?
Right. Well, you just don't know. And there's like Western medicine, there's functional medicine. And I think right now we're at a place where like everyone's kind of like torn in between the two, where I think my mind and my heart are at like, hey, I think we need to meet in the middle and like utilize things from both areas. But it
Yeah.
is like you constantly, even like me going to nursing school, it's like drilled into my brain like go to the hospital, take medicine, get these images done. And it's hard for me to like change my mind. And I want to
Hmm.
change my mind, but it's just been like drilled into our brains as we've aged like no, don't take natural things, don't do this, don't do that. So,
Right. Well, and I think part of the reason wellness scams and these like grifts are so successful, are they work so well on this, is that you know mainstream Western medicine, especially for people like women, people of color, anyone who is not fully served by the system that we live in the majority of the time, our concerns are not met with anything from medicine. Like
yeah.
in and so we need some, you know, our quality of life is not a priority when we go to the doctor. It is they're trying to keep us alive, which is great, you know, like
Yes.
good. We need that too. But like
Yeah.
we are not there, we have so many things that are not like I'm dying or like, oh, you tested my levels and I'm normal, but I'm still um, suffering. I'm still in pain. I'm still like not able
Mhm.
to live my life the way I want to. And functional medicine or alternative medicine or like natural stuff can can legitimately be a thing that like helps us improve our quality of life. like those practitioners will listen to us, will validate us, will like help us make a plan to try to feel better. And that can be taken, that situation gets also taken advantage of by people who want to make money off of us by,
Right.
uh, it's a vulnerability. And, I don't necessarily think it's 100% on Western, mainstream medicine to fix it, but like,
Yeah.
it's definitely a little bit their fault that this vulnerability exists and that there are so many people that they are not serving. And that's their fault.
Yes. I agree. And even bringing insurance into it, insurance doesn't cover any of that type of
Right.
medicine. So I think that that is a huge reason why people are like, I'm not going to go to that. Like you said, even just going to that endometriosis specialist, you just had to pay all out of pocket in
Yep.
hopes that she would help you and have answers for you, which luckily she did, but not everyone is that lucky either. They'll
Exactly.
go to some of these places or take all these supplements and it's like, oh, nothing
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. Or something worse happens. Like, and actually, this happens. A lot of people um, who have endometriosis, like what the insurance covers, there's a whole issue with how insurance covers endometriosis surgery, where there are two kinds of surgery for endometriosis: ablation and excision. Ablation is where both are laparoscopic, so they're minimally invasive. They go in through like 4 or 5 small holes with cameras and like little robotic or like operated tiny equipment. And ablation, they burn the surface of the endometriosis lesions, which doesn't take very long. It's a short surgery and it doesn't
Hmm.
require advanced equipment or training. It requires training, obviously, but like it's not as involved as excision. Excision involves going in there with like little scissors and cutting out the lesions, like getting all of it. And my doctor compared it to like ablation is like cutting off the white part of your fingernail, where
Hmm.
it gets shorter. It might not bother you for a while, but it's definitely going to come back because it never went away. You never got it
Right.
all. And excision is taking off the whole nail, which like the metaphor breaks down because why would you do that? But
Yeah. Yeah.
but you take off the nail, it's not gonna grow back. It's there. It's
Hmm.
gone. But that's it's a surgery that takes longer. It's a surgery that requires more advanced training and equipment. And the way that it is coded in the insurance, in the AMA and the insurance guidelines, it's coded the same. So if you are a doctor that takes insurance, which surgery are you going to do? The 1 hour one that gets you $600, which is still not enough, but like you going to do
Yeah.
ablation because it is more cost effective, or are you going to do excision, which requires so much more investment and time and is reimbursed the same? And so a lot of people, the problem with ablation though is that you get burns on your organs and inside of you. And
Yeah.
a lot of people come back, a few months later, a year later, a couple years later, with even more pain because of the scar. And
Jeez.
uh, and the more surgeries you have, the more risk there is for central sensitization, which is basically your body has like been cut into too many times. It's traumatized and you have chronic pain.
Hmm.
And so, like, we're not doing, and 1 in 10 women has endometriosis. 1 in 10.
Yeah.
My doctor estimates 70% of severe period pain is caused by endometriosis. And it is so underdiagnosed. And part of it is because uh, who can pay $800? Like,
Yeah.
when I was 35, was the first time in my life I had the disposable income to pay $800 to see a doctor who might be able to help me, you know?
Yeah. That is honestly crazy. And I feel like, so I used to live in Columbus, Ohio. It's not New York City or Los Angeles, but it's bigger than where I live now, which is Des Moines, Iowa.
Mhm.
And I definitely feel like there's a difference too. Like I could get better answers there, better care in Columbus than
Yeah.
I can here.
Yeah.
And so I did the same thing. I went to my OBGYN here and I said, "Do you think this could be endometriosis?" Like, she didn't bring it up. I had to bring it up myself.
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, there's no way it could be endometriosis." Well, then months later, I went to the Mayo Clinic, which everyone knows the Mayo Clinic. They're well respected. And they're like, "This is probably endometriosis." And I was
Right.
like, how can it be so different? I mean, that's another thing. It's like sometimes you just don't know what to believe. And as a nurse consultant, I just had a recent client who her OBGYN said the same thing, like, you probably have endometriosis. Like you said, it can't be diagnosed unless you actually have laparoscopic surgery and have it tested. And her insurance wouldn't cover this medication called Oralisa because she
Yeah.
wasn't diagnosed with endometriosis. So it's like, okay,
Exactly.
so do you just want to pay for this expensive surgery instead of the medication? Like, just a
Right.
lot of it doesn't make any sense. And then you
It
kind of
makes
just
no
feel
sense.
stuck.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
and then it's like, okay, well, at the end, like, do I want to deal with all of this bullshit that's going to take so much of my like time and energy and like it's going to be so frustrating, or do I just want to deal with the period pain? Like, as bad
Yeah.
as it is, at least I know what I'm dealing with and I can do something about it, and it doesn't involve being on the phone with like people who don't care.
Right. Exactly. And that's
Yeah,
exactly why I started my company, LahSET, to be a nurse consultant for people like you. It's like, I'll be on the phone for people. I'll wait on
yeah.
hold for people. I will write appeal letters. I'll do all these things because it's exhausting and you
Mhm.
already don't feel good. And sometimes you just don't even know how to advocate for yourself, you know?
Right, right. Well, and we don't know what we don't know. Like
Hmm.
yes, it's easier now with, you can Google your symptoms, but like you're not
Yeah.
always going to get good information. And also, a lot of doctors don't like when you come in with ideas about what you might have. Like,
Oh,
um,
yeah. They hate
and
that.
so they hate it. And so it's between a rock and a hard place. It's like, okay, I have this pain.
Yep.
If you're not gonna tell me what you think it might be or help me figure it out, and then I bring in answers that I want you to chase down. Like, okay, well, give me this test. Like, then you
Hmm.
don't like me and you're not gonna like give me as good care. And yeah, it's absolutely, it's crazy. It's crazy.
It is. So, how are you feeling now? And what has been helping you?
Yeah, so I mean, right at this moment, I feel fine. I'm about
Yeah. Good.
a little under 2 weeks into my cycle. So about 10 days ago, I had a really, really bad period. I was in pain. I had to take a Valium so I wouldn't go to the hospital. Um,
Okay.
but I'm feeling a lot better now.
Good.
I am taking a supplement, a maca root supplement, to help balance hormones. It's specifically like formulated for endometriosis. Um,
Okay.
Found that that is very helpful. Um, I again have to like keep reminding myself, and I've been taking this supplement for like 4 or 5 months now, and I've had a pain-free period, which was incredible. I'm
That's
also taking a
awesome.
lot of other supplements that are more focused on like digestion, which I think does help bring down the overall level of inflammation.
Yeah.
Um, and I changed the way that I exercise. So I'm doing a lot more like yoga and walking. I'm still running. I love running, but I'm trying not to do that the week before my period. I'm
Yeah.
only doing like intense like hit workouts or like a spinning class or something like that. Like when I genuinely feel up for it, I'm trying to like make myself do anything that doesn't feel good for my body.
Yeah.
Trying to eat lots of different kinds of vegetables, lots of lean protein, um, and also getting enough fat, especially in the morning, from sources like avocado, olive oil, ghee, uh, because fat is so essential for like hormone balancing. Which again
Yeah.
is another thing. Hormone balancing sounds so scammy and grifty, and there's so many people on TikTok like selling you supplements for it, but also it's a real thing. And like, especially when you
Yes.
have endometriosis or PCOS, when like you do have to like pay attention and care about what is going on with your hormones. We live in a world full of endocrine disruptors. I've tried to get rid of a lot of like kitchen utensils that are plastic.
Yep.
Trying to like store food in glass containers instead of plastic ones. Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. I also started seeing a
Yeah.
pelvic floor physical therapist. That
Okay.
and I think that was really, really helpful, just because of the years of pain and how like tight and constricted everything had gotten. Um, and so I saw her once a week for a few months, and now I see her just once, like a few days before my period is supposed to start. And so that has been huge. Again, not covered by insurance. The nutritionist, not covered by insurance.
Oh,
I've spent over 10,
seriously?
yeah, I spent over $10,000. In 2024, I spent over $10,000 getting a diagnosis, treating, uh, doing a treatment. Like, I haven't had surgery. I'm seeing how much better I can get with just um,
Yeah.
lifestyle and supplements and like changing the way I do things. And
Yeah.
if I can get pretty far with that, I would like to avoid surgery if I can.
Right.
But we'll see.
Did the endometriosis specialist, did she say that you typically do that for a certain amount of time until you're like, okay, maybe we should look at surgery? Or is it like based
Yeah.
on what you think or feel?
So one of the reasons I think she's a very good doctor is she doesn't she in her opinion, it is not good to just go ahead and do surgery right away unless there's like an emergency situation. Um,
Yeah.
Partly because there's so much inflammation that goes along with this condition. What she likes to do is have patients like basically go from the outside in and try to reduce all of the things that the endo has caused and exacerbated over the last however many years you've had it.
Yeah.
So kind of bring everything down, bring the temperature of everything down. Like if your digestion is working, your inflammation is going to go down. If your nervous system is like a little bit lower temperature, your inflammation is going to go down. And inflammation is so important for surgery. Like it's such a risk. It makes surgery go so much worse that like the more she can help you bring the inflammation down before you even like get to the point of scheduling a surgery, the better the surgery
Yeah.
is going to go and the better your
Okay.
recovery from the surgery is going to go. So I've really appreciated that. Like I am someone who would like to do like the least intervention possible in terms of like
Yeah.
cutting me open.
Right.
So I am hopeful. It's been about 5 months. I think at like 6 or 7 months, we're gonna like have another appointment and talk about like how are my symptoms, what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know
Yeah.
what the best choice is gonna be. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's all good information. And I feel like everything you're saying is good information. All women have periods. I think a lot of women have period pain. And so, if you had to say one thing to women experiencing period pain, what would it be?
Oh boy. I mean, there's so many. That's why I made a podcast because I have so much to say.
Yes.
I think the number one thing is you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. Like maybe there is something wrong with you in terms of like maybe you have endometriosis, maybe you have a thing that's causing this pain, but like
Right.
it's not your fault. And you are not making up this pain. And you should
Yeah.
not have to deal with this pain, especially alone. So if you are seeing a doctor who is not uh, who is dismissing your pain, who, if you are seeing a doctor where you are up against a brick wall, you have just, you've gotten an ultrasound and it came back normal, and they're like, okay, well, no, nothing else to do, everything's fine. Get a new doctor, or like follow Dr. Karen Tan on Instagram or TikTok. She has all of these. She has a book out with like it's categorized via your symptoms, and you can look up your symptoms and it will tell you what tests you can ask your doctor for. um, and you
That's
can tell your
awesome.
doctor, yes, you can tell your doctor, I would like this test because I think I might have this, and here's why I think that. I would like you to order this test for me. I would like to see if I have this. because it's easy to say, go get a new doctor, but like, there's no guarantee your new doctor is going to be any better at this than your old doctor. So sometimes you just have to
Right.
be a pain in the ass and don't
Yeah.
worry. Like, maybe that's the other thing I would say is like, don't try to be liked by your doctor. Don't worry about being an easy patient. Like, that is very hard for me. I'm like a straight A student type. Like, I want to be liked by authorities. And I
Yeah.
have had to throw that out the window and like go to my doctor with a list. And I write down a list because I always forget when I'm in there. But I say, hey, I've been having this symptom. What do you think that could be? Okay, here's what I'm worried it is. What do you think about that? Are there reasons why I shouldn't be worried for this? Is there a test we can do for this? Okay, I looked this up. There is a test we can do for this. Will you order it for me? No. Why? Okay, like, you have
Yeah.
to treat them like they are like someone that you are managing at work, because they do not care about you as much as you care about you. And
Yeah.
you have to be on their ass. Like, and you have to, they're like an intern. Treat them like an intern at work, where like you ask them a question, but you don't necessarily trust their answer, that like they have all the information.
Yeah. Nope, I agree. I feel like that's all good information. You have to advocate for yourself, ask a million questions. If they roll their eyes at you, who cares? It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with anything. Like, just keep going.
I will also say we got this recommendation directly from an emergency room physician. I asked him what we should do if we have like a bad experience in the ER, if we get bad treatment in the ER, and
Yeah.
he said, write a letter, not to the doctor, but to the hospital administration, because when doctors get letters complaining about how they treated a patient, the administrators go to that doctor and they say, hi, can you like show me your documentation on this? Like, why did you make this decision? Why did you make that decision? And
Yeah.
at least, like, I know it is it's like another thing on your to-do list when you have already dealt with this like shitty thing. But
Mhm.
I am a spiteful, petty person. And like, the idea that I could write a letter and it would result in someone like getting in trouble and like having to explain themselves and having to like go to a meeting,
Yeah.
great. If nothing else, if it doesn't totally fix the problem, at least it made that person's day a little bit worse. And that is fine for me.
Yes. Well, I think, yes, like you're saying, it's in hopes of changing someone. Like,
Right.
if another Kate comes into the ER and has the
Right.
same problems, that doctor is going to think a little more intentionally on helping that patient. It's going to be a better experience. And again,
That's
that's
the
something,
hope.
yes, that's something
But
I
I'm
do as a nurse
cynical.
consultant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I know. Yes,
It's
but
it's
that's,
not a it won't motivate me enough to think like maybe this will like help fix the issue. It'll motivate me to be like, I'm gonna mess up that person's day.
oh my gosh. Well, when you have the experience you had, I don't blame you. So,
Right.
yes. Well, thank you so much, Kate. This was so much fun talking to you. I'm happy that you're feeling better. This is all good information. And everybody go listen to the Cramped podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Yeah.
And I
Come
hope you
hang out.
guys enjoy.
Yeah.
Yes. Have a good
Thank
day,
you so much for
everybody.
having me.
Yes, you're welcome. Bye.
If you have a healthcare story you'd like to share and would like to be our next guest on our podcast, head on over to our website, www.LahSET.com. That's www.lahset.com, or you can email us at info@LahSET.com. Thanks for listening, everybody.